But honestly, there are also other things that I love. And because of my pride and fear and anger and my lusts, my loves get disordered, right? They get out of whack. And we, of course, will love other things, but our loves have to be in order, and love for Jesus has to come absolutely first, and then all other loves come after that. How do we put our loves back in order? Following Mary's example, I would argue that the solution is deliberate devotion. Anytime Mary had an opportunity to sit at Jesus' feet and remove all distractions, she focused her attention and her love and her time on Jesus. That's how she showed Jesus that she loved him. Now, if I can take you back to the meal that Dylan spoke about last week, you remember that Martha is serving, Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet. And Luke records this about Martha. It says, Martha was distracted with much service. Now, service bad. Service is not bad. Serving is not bad. The word there for service is diakonos. You get the word deacon from that. It just means servant. Remember early in the book of Acts, the apostles are preaching and they're teaching, but also there are widows who need food and they need financial help. And so they're trying to do all of these things and they realize we can't do it all, so we're going to ask a few people to really focus on that. Their worship, their ministry, so to speak, will be the ministry of service. Service is good, but service isn't first. Undistracted, unrestrained, love for Jesus, holding nothing back, that's first. And everything else flows from that. Imagine you've heard of the book, 5 Languages of Love. If you ever want to be in love, you should read that book. It's a really good book. Tristan and I read that early on in our marriage, but it's really helpful, not just for married couples or engaged, but also for understanding your parents or your children or your friends, your family, your roommates, whatever. It's about how people give love and how they receive love. And his argument is that we all have languages that are primary in the way that we give love and the way that we want to receive love. When Tristan and I were first married, I realized that her primary love languages are words of affirmation and quality time. My wife loves words of affirmation and quality time. It can be verbal, it can be a note, whatever. So she wants my attention, my time. I'm distracted, just to be together. So words of affirmation, quality time. But we hit a stage in life where her love language shifted. And that was when we had little kids. Okay, when we had little kids, her love language shifted from words of affirmation and quality time to acts of service. Okay? Acts of service was the way that she wanted to receive love. I remember one day, very vividly, coming home from work, and I had a great day at work. So I'm like, hey, you had a great day at work. How was your day? And she goes, it's okay. Well, what'd you do today? She said, I wiped. Today I wiped. I wiped counters, I wiped floors, I wiped noses, I wiped behinds. I wiped today, and I was like, husband, take note. The love language has just shifted. What can I do to serve you? What can I wipe on your behalf, right? How can I help and express my love to you in this moment, right? Her love language shifted. Everybody has primary love languages, but sometimes they move around. If you apply this to God, what do you think God's primary love language is? I'm going to argue that it is unrestrained worship, right? I'm going to add a 6th that applies only to God. I would argue his primary love language is unrestrained worship. I would argue that God's primary love language is not acts of service. Now, before you say to yourself, man, after the service, I'm going to go see if Brian's ever read Ephesians 2, verse 10. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've read it. I read it. It's been a long time. But I've read Ephesians 2:10, right? For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus 4 good works, 4 acts of service, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. God made us to do good works. That is true, but that's secondary. That flows from a heart that is first fully and completely consecrated to God because we love Jesus more than we love anything else. And then from that heart flows our acts of service, flows our words of praise, flows our financial giving, flows our, as Sarah said, everything then becomes an act of worship, but unrestrained worship of Jesus and showing him our complete devotion is first. That's first. And all of our other loves and all of our other acts of worship become ordered around that. Mary understood that. And so it became the pattern of her life. Was it the only thing she did? No. But it was the most important thing that she did. Second lesson. Unrestrained worship requires sacrifice. Verse 3 says, Mary then took a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. So Mary's act of worship here had a very real, tangible financial cost. We're told that what she anointed Jesus with was pure nard. That's an aromatic oil that comes from a plant in India. So not even made here in the land of Israel. It's very rare, it's very expensive, it's very potent. A normal flask or jar of this nard or oil would be about 1 to 2 ounces. And it was used often as an investment because it was easily stored, it wouldn't go bad, you could transport it easily. But if an honored guest came, you put a drop or 2 on the head of that guest. We're told that Mary puts an entire pound, it's a Roman pound, so it's 12 ounces. She puts an entire pound, Roman pound, 12 ounces on Jesus. And we learn later in the story that it's worth 300 denarii. That is what a working person could earn in an entire year. That is an entire year's worth of earnings. Not an entire year's worth of savings, but an entire year's worth of earnings. So students, imagine if for some reason you have to go back and live with your parents after you graduate. And go, oh, but just imagine, they say, sure, you're welcome to come and live with us again. And in fact, we're going to cover all of your expenses for a year so you can save everything. So we're going to pay for your car. We're going to pay for your car insurance. We're going to pay for any trips to the doctor. We're going to pay for your health insurance. We're going to pay for your food. We're going to pay for your new clothes you need for work and your shoes if they wear out. Like, we're going to cover absolutely every single expense so that you can save all $80,000 that you're going to make in your first job. So, yeah, don't do education, do engineering, right? So, but just imagine, you're making $80,000, you bank $80,000, at the end of the year, you take that $80,000 and you just give it all to Jesus. So Mary's probably from a wealthy family, but this likely represents her entire savings. And she gives everything to Jesus. She holds nothing back. In fact, we're told in Mark's account that she breaks the vial. She could have measured it out. She could have. Would it be appropriate to give Jesus a drop or 2? An honored guest gets a drop or 2. Or she could maybe just taken the cork out and poured a quarter or a half, maybe even 2/3. But she breaks the neck because it is in her intent to hold 10%. Nothing back in her worship. Now, that's not law, right? That's not in the law of Moses. There's no commandment for her to do that. This is just an act of pure, unrestrained love for Jesus. Nobody told her to do this. Nobody commanded her to do this. But she poured it out. And when I was reading that passage, I thought again about Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac. Remember the story where God said, take your son, your only son, the son whom you love. And I want you to go up on that hill, and I want you to worship by giving me your son. Just sacrifice him. And Abraham did it. Abraham didn't discuss. Abraham didn't debate. Abraham didn't hesitate. It says he rose early. Wow. That's a little phrase, but he rose early. He didn't wait till noon. Maybe God will change his mind. Let's wait till 3 p.m. It's too late to go today. I'll have to go tomorrow. He rose early, and he's ready to give his son, the son on whom all of the promises that God had given him, they all rest on Isaac. And he's ready. He's bringing the knife down, and God says, this is not what I want. Here's the substitute. But he was ready and willing to give God all because he loved God most. Are you holding anything back? Are you restrained in your love for God through worship? I compare that, my mind jumped immediately to the Acts chapter 5, the story of Ananias and Sapphira, who wanted to appear as devoted to Jesus. They sold their property, and then they brought just a portion, and then they lied about it, right? They're holding something back. Now, I don't want to be that, but I'll tell you, a few months ago, I had this just kind of weird heart moment. Just felt like it was kind of exposed my calculating self, right? When I think about, contemplate giving something to someone or to the Lord, I begin to calculate the cost. And the setting was that a family came over and they had a little son. My son happened to actually come through at that point in time, so he's great with kids. He goes, hey, let's go play Legos. He goes up in the attic and pulls all these Legos out, and they're sitting up there and they're making Legos. And this little boy, he made a car, really cool wheels, and just builds this car. And at the end, I was up there sitting with him playing a little bit, and kid finished making his Lego car, and my son said, hey, just take that home with you. And I swear to you, in my heart, I go, don't give away your Legos. I mean, it's like, it was just a really weird moment, and I'm thinking, first of all, those aren't even my Legos. Also, we have 1 million Legos. I mean, they're everywhere. There's no way they're ever going to get completely played with again. And I wanted to say, oh, I love my son's heart, but are you sure you want to give away your Legos? I just started calculating about the Legos, and I thought, how often do I do that with the Lord? Where I think about what I could give to the Lord, and I begin to calculate, am I sure I want to give that much? The truth is, if you quietly follow Jesus, the world is going to leave you alone. Go to church. Go to church once in a while. Read your Bible a little bit, that's great. Would you give your money to a missionary? That's crazy. You're going where this summer? Why? You go to church every Sunday? You get up at what time to read your Bible? In my heart, I calculate the cost of that. But unrestrained worship doesn't calculate the cost. It's just an act of love. Now, I reconfirmed this week that the cost to raise a child from 0 to 18 is $310,000 for the average family. $310,000 from 0 to 18. So that doesn't include college, doesn't include any kind of extra medical bills, right? But I promise you that no parent has ever calculated that cost. Well, maybe until today, maybe this morning, now you're gonna go back and add it up. But I didn't say to my son, hey buddy, you're a little bit over the diaper budget. You need to scale it back, right? No, you don't even think, but you're gonna provide because you love your children. You just give and you give and you give and you give and you don't count the cost. It's unrestrained love. But that requires sacrifice. And Mary holds nothing back. Third lesson we learn is that unrestrained worship requires courage. Verse 4 says, but Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples who was intending to betray him, said, why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor? Now he said this not because he was concerned about the poor, but because he was a thief. And as he had the money box, he used to pilfer what was put into it. So, okay, imagine this scene again. There's a breaking of the glass. What happens? All attention stops. And so on our extended 30th anniversary celebration. We ended by going to dinner over at the Republic. Super fancy, hadn't been there in a long time, didn't want to go to Torchy's. We decided we'll go to the Republic. And as we sat down, we hadn't even ordered yet, and somebody in the kitchen dropped a bunch of dishes, right? It happens at cheap restaurants, it happens in the Republic sometimes. And what happens? You've been in a restaurant where this has happened. Somebody drops dishes, the station stops. All eyes go to Mary. She's broken the neck of the perfume bottle. She's poured all of the perfume out, and we're told the perfume permeates the entire room. It had to be incredibly aromatic. Now again, back to recent experiences, so you talk about it all the time. I promise I won't do this forever, but back on our anniversary. We went to Austin for a few days, and then we went to Dallas to take in the Dallas Stars game, because my wife is such a good sport with me, and I want to go to a Stars game. And she said, I want to go to a Stars game too. I'm like, well, how much do you want to go?
Yeah.
All of it. She's just all in. So we sat next to, I think, some of the worst fans ever on the planet. It was just like, well, we still had fun, but a guy right in front of me was just screaming the whole game at the opposing goalie, and I was like, I just leaned there, I can't hear you. I didn't say that. Because my wife was with me, and she's kind of the constraint, the boundary up there. I don't yell at people out the window when I'm driving, because Christy's with me. If she's not with me, you might see me, whatever. But I didn't. But then there's a guy sitting right next to me, who bathed in cologne. You ever been there? I was just like, oh my gosh, man. And I'm just, initially we said, hey, let's move down one. So we moved down, there's an empty seat. And then that guy came to that seat, and I had to move back next to this guy, right? And I did. I was trying to not like make a scene out of it, only because Christy's there. But I pulled my quarter zip up literally over my nose at one point. It was just so strong. And he didn't actually bathe in it. He probably just put a little bit too much. But that's the point of cologne and perfume. A little goes a long way. That's all you need. Mary has just poured out on Jesus' feet and Jesus' head an entire pound of this thick oil perfume. And so the glass breaks. Conversation stops. All eyes look on Mary. The scent just assaults absolutely everyone. And they say, what are you doing, you stupid woman? Now we're told in John's account, it's Judas Iscariot first, and his motive is that now there's less money in the money box, right? It could have gone to him. But in Matthew's account, it says it's all the disciples. It says the disciples were indignant when they saw this, and they said, why this waste? And in Mark's account, we're told it's not just Judas, it's not just the disciples, but it's everybody in the room. And we're told by Mark that they start to scold her.
Are we planning to get something from you?
Foolish woman. And Jesus says, what you call worship, waste, I call worship. That's worship. And that requires courage. And think how low she would have to go to wipe his feet with her hair. She breaks all social conventions, and she's completely ridiculed, and she doesn't care what anybody else thinks. All that she cares about is expressing her love for Jesus. If you follow Jesus quietly, the world will leave you alone. But as soon as you begin to worship him first, foremost, sacrificially, extravagantly, you will be ridiculed. Are you ready for that? Do you care what the world says about your love for Jesus? Is it worth it to love Jesus first, foremost, highest, best? The answer is yes. Fourth lesson, Jesus rewards unrestrained worship. Verse 7 says, therefore Jesus said, let her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. Jesus says, leave her alone, you jerks. That's in the Greek. It's not in the Greek, but that's what I feel like Jesus was thinking. He says, leave her alone. He defends her. You're calling it waste. I'm calling it worship. It accomplishes nothing. There's nothing productive in it. It's just an act of love. And then he praises her. Again, back in Matthew's account, it says, Jesus, aware of what they were saying and their ridicule of her, said to them, why do you bother the woman? For she has done a good deed to me. He commends her. Mary, well done. Right? Mary, we know. Mary's on a roll. During the meal, she's at Jesus' feet, Martha's serving. And Jesus says, she's chosen the good part. Leave her alone. She's done a good deed. Mary is figured out. He commends her. He protects her. He guards her. He praises her. But I would argue that the greatest reward that she receives here is that she has insight and intimacy with Jesus that no one else has. See that in the text? No one else has that. Matthew 26, verse 13. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be spoken of in memory of her. She will have a legacy. So here we are, 2,000 years later. For 2,000 years, people have been saying, wow. I feel a little uncomfortable by what Mary did. I also feel really challenged, and I feel really inspired. And Jesus said, this will be remembered forever and ever and ever.
I think it's done.
And she did it because she'd been listening to Jesus. And she had an intimacy of relationship with Jesus that I would argue not even any of the disciples had. Verse 12. Because when she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Mary may not have understood, Mary certainly didn't understand everything that was going to happen to Jesus. But she knew that he was going to be crucified. And she understood that this was a moment to prepare Jesus for that crucifixion. How did Mary know that? Because Mary sat at Jesus' feet and Mary listened to Jesus. Jesus had said it over and over and over again. Going to be rejected by the spiritual leadership of Israel, and they're going to mock me and scourge me and crucify me. He had said that. In fact, if you go back to the beginning of Matthew chapter 26, just hours earlier, so Jesus finished all these words. He said to his disciples, you know that after 2 days, the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man is to be handed over for crucifixion. He had just literally said this to them, maybe right before the meal. And he had said it multiple times to his disciples. If you read the gospel accounts, every time Jesus told them that he was going to be crucified, they went, okay, who do you think is the greatest among us? I mean, it never registered, because they weren't undistracted, they weren't focused, they weren't listening, they weren't complete in their love for Jesus. But Mary, man, she's tuning out everything else, so that she can hear Jesus' voice, and she does hear. And so she knows. And so she takes her life savings and she goes and purchases a pound of perfume so that Jesus can be ready. Trace said something really interesting to me between services. I've never thought of before, right? His crucifixion happens just shortly after this. How much of that scent still lingered on him? It's a sticky oil substance, and it was in his hair and it was on his feet. I never thought about that before. It was really rich. Hanging on the cross, she had prepared him. Sweet aroma of salvation coming from Jesus again. Just because Mary said,